Habari ya jioni, habari ya asubuhi. Good morning, Kenya. Good evening, those who are in South California and here in the United States. Welcome to A Moment with Kasisi. And my name is Johnson Kĩriakũ Kĩnyua. And I'm so glad that you're here this hour of the evening here in California and morning in Kenya. In this live broadcast, I will be discussing a few points, particularly what happens with us from the previous reading when we fully show up and when we use the resources that the Lord has provided to us and when we trust. But more so, as we shall see today, it's paying attention to details, not losing sight of the larger picture, because sometimes as individuals, we tend to lose sight of the large picture and we pay attention to, we tend to lose that bigger picture as we pay attention to small details. And it is very important that you pay attention to small details at the same time looking at the larger picture. And one of the areas that most of us do not do very well, it's when we always put the goal in mind, when the outcome is what leads us to action. Sometimes we are fixated to that which is the outcome of what we are doing. And we become slavery to the consequence of an activity. But our reading today, while speaking to the same thing that we spoke about last time, asking the question, how are you showing up? Today we'll be looking at how are you paying attention to details, at the same time, what drives you? Is it the outcome that drives you, or is it a call to duty? Because when you look at the way sometimes we live our lives, when you think about money and you start working so hard to get money, in this case, you're paying attention and you're getting fixated to getting money. But there's a larger picture beyond getting money. There is something more beautiful than just getting wealth. When you get fixated in an enemy, you want to attack, you want to retaliate, you want to fight back, you get fixated to that outcome of what you want to do. But there's a larger picture beyond that which you may look at as the outcome. And so today, I want us to zoom in. And this is something that I have been doing and I continue doing as we do this Bible study. What do I mean by zooming in? When you look at your photo, for example, you take a picture of yourself, what you see is the final product. What you see is the low resolution of the final product, or the high resolution of the final product. But if you zoom in to the very basic of what makes that photo, and you see the tiny points that make the larger picture, you begin to understand that tiny bit as you look at the larger picture. In the scriptures that we have been looking at, both in Greek, Gĩkũyũ, and English, we've been trying to look at the details, small details, paying attention to the small details, but at the same time looking at the larger picture. So every time you're looking at this, you have to have John in mind, the writer. There is what John, the writer, is trying to communicate. That's what I'm saying as the larger picture. But there is also the details of the moment that we have to pay attention to. And therefore, without much ado, then I want to read the two verses for our Bible study today, beginning with the Greek part of it. I hope you don't mind. I hope you continue learning with me. And then I will give my translation of the two verses before we look at what is this that I'm referring to as the minor details and then the outcome itself. And here we go. John chapter 2, verse 7 and 8. I'll try to read as slow as I can and also try to give my own take in Gĩkũyũ and in English. Legei autois ho Jesus, gemesate tas hudrias hudatos, kai egemesan autas hios ano. Kai legei autois antlesate nun kai ferete ti artirkilen hoi de enegekan. Here is my English translation of the two verses and then the Gĩkũyũ part of it before we get into the details of it. Jesus says to them, and note that the scripture here speaks in the present tense, which is quite interesting because you would have expected this, the writer to speak in the past because he is narrating something that is already happened. But John chooses to use the present tense, and he says, Jesus says to them, fill the water jars, and they filled them up to the brim. And he says to them, draw out now and carry it to the chief master. And they drew out. Yesu amera yoria inyongo cianyu mai magĩcioria kinya gũitĩkĩrĩra. Nake amera tahiai rĩu na mũtwarĩre mũtabania kana mũtabarĩri na magĩtahia. When you look at these two verses, sometimes you may think, what can we draw from that? But there's a lot in those two verses. As I said, that sometimes we tend to look at the outcome more than paying attention to the details. But both of them are very important in our discussion. So far, we have seen that the stage is set by Mary, Mariam. She's not mentioned as Mariam, but we know that she's the mother of Jesus. And she spoke to Jesus and saying, because they had run out of wine or joy, and she wanted Jesus to do something. And her son says, what has this to do with me or you? But anyway, Mary goes quickly, and I want to make a correction here because last time I translated it as disciples, but actually it's not the disciples, but the servants or servers. That is those who serve, because the word there I think is diakones, which is also used for deacon. A mistake that I made in that translation last week, but it is the servant that Mary, when she speaks to Jesus, who is human, and we saw that in her showing up, she knew what it would take for her to convince his own son, who is human at this point in time, who is incarnate. That's the point I've been trying to emphasize. At the same time, knowing without a doubt that the son was going to act. And so she has set the stage, and we know it is in a wedding. I want you to think with me. And we get some ideas on how this stage look like from just one single word. And this is the word that is translated the chief servant, or you can say the chief waiter, or maybe the butler, chief butler, or even chief slave, one who is chosen by the host of the day to make sure that everything is running well. In Gĩkũyũ, we would call that motavania, or ambaye pengine Kiswahili yangu pengine hapo itanikosoa kidogo, but the point here is the one who has been chosen by the host to make sure that everything works well. And we have these people today whom, we give the authority to design, to prepare, and to help us in terms of making that occasion come out beautifully. The organizers of occasions. So that word that is translated as chief priest, chief guest, chief waiter, or chief butler, or chief slave, or chief servant, has an element that speaks of a room, part of it, art, and then the other two parts, they speak of like a room with 3 couches. So we know that is a setting of a banquet. That's the idea that I'm trying to bring in. That this individual who is given authority by the owner has set up a banquet where everybody is going to enjoy. They have run out of wine. And Mary or Mariam sets the stage for that. And the question as we zoom in now to look into the details of the story, the first question is, who is in the room? And here is the interesting part. We already know from the previous readings that Jesus and his disciples, assumption here is about 4 disciples because they are the ones who have been introduced in chapter 1. It could be more, but we don't know. But we know it's Jesus with the 4 disciples, and the mother is one of those invited. We now know that there is a chief servant, and they are servants because Mariam does speak to the servants. And then definitely there is the host, there is the bridegroom, there is the bride, and we expect that there are family members that are in the room. Look at how the interaction happens again. These are the details that we need to pay. Who is saying what to who? Mariam is saying something to the servants. Tell him, do as he tells you. And then Jesus speaks to the servant and say, go fill up. We don't know, but we assume because later we know that they're going to fill up these jars with water. Go fill them up, draw, and take it to the chief servant. One of important details to pay attention here is that the servants know that something is going to happen. Possibly the disciples also have an idea because they are with Jesus. Mariam also knows that something is going to be done by her own son. And Jesus, of course, he is the one who is going to perform this miracle. But the chief servant, who is supposed to know that they are running out of wine and to know that something needs to be done, has no clue, has no idea. The host, no clue. The bridegroom and the bride and the family members, they have no idea of what is taking place in the background. Think about that for a minute. You know, the outcome definitely would be to have wine, to make sure that everybody is served with wine. It's a crisis, definitely. And that would be the outcome, satisfying the crisis. But we see in the interaction between Jesus and the servants, they are not paying a lot of attention to the crisis, but to what needs to be done at that particular time. You know, there are times ourselves we get stuck. We know what we want in life. You've prepared so hard. You have gotten that degree. You were working 8 hours, 7 days a week, or whatever days that you're working. Yet, you don't seem to be moving anywhere. You seem stuck. You're not sure what is the next step that you need to take. And when you look at this interaction beyond that, you also see something could also have happened. There's a possibility that the servants could have asked Mariam And who are you to give us instructions here? We have the chief priest, we have the chief servant over there. We take orders from the chief servant. We don't take orders from a woman. There's that possibility that they could have raised questions. But instead of raising any question, they understand the crisis, they know the need, and they need to act. That's the point. They need to act. When you are stuck, sometimes we tend to be very dismissive. I know that. I know because of thinking highly of my own education, that sometimes somebody will say a very profound, or will give me some point of, directions, give me wisdom on some things, and I'll look at them and say, well, they are not as learned as I am. Why should I be taking orders from them? Why should they be telling me what to do? Somebody may never have gone to school and comes up with an idea and says, hey, here's an idea. I got an idea. And sometimes we are very dismissive and we don't pay attention to details. We're just looking at the bigger picture. And you say, and who are you, by the way? You don't have no education. What can you do for me? Just as the disciples would have asked, we have the master over there. You should not be the one giving us instructions. But the good thing about this narrative is that the servants pay attention to details. What they are told to do, they do. They don't question it. In the days that we are living, and they are very difficult days, sometimes we need to listen to wisdom. And wisdom may not come from where we are expecting it to come. It may not come from that professor you are expecting. It may not come from that husband or that wife you are expecting from. It may not come from the wise, from the pastor. Wisdom may come from a very, a place where an unexpected place. But are you paying attention to details? Are you listening? And are you able to pick it up? You can only pick up what wisdom is giving you, whether it is nature, whether it is the little people around you, whether it is the simple people around you, whether it is from the unexpected quarter. We will only be able to pay attention if we honor what we are doing right now. The servants were willing to honor what they are called to do, to serve. If you're willing to honor that which you're doing today, without necessarily thinking so highly of yourself, you will definitely accept and receive instructions from quarters that you never would have expected. I know as a minister, I have been dismissed by many people who think that, what do I have to do with a pastor? What does a pastor know? What do Christians know? They know nothing, and we tend to dismiss people who have wisdom, people who have the right tools that you need in your life to move you from the point where you are stuck to that other point. But the problem comes because we have the mind, the edit in our mind, and we want that which we think is the outcome, and therefore we target that, we spend time in that, and we do everything that is possible without caring how we are doing it, just because we want to receive something. Now, the final point here is that when Jesus gives instruction, the servants follow the instructions to the hilt, to the last bait. They draw water. They fill the 6 jars, as we read from last time. It's a lot of work, and they just don't fill it. They fill it to the brim, to overflow. And then they just filled water, and they know it's wine that is needed, not water. We need wine. We don't need water. But then they still accept when he says, remember Mariam had said to them, do as he tells you. follow the instructions. Look at the manual. Read the manual. Follow the manual. Follow the steps. Because each step at a time is going to lead you to something that is greater and bigger. And so they draw water. I mean, it looks crazy. It looks stupid that somebody just tells you to put water in a jar and then you go draw that water expecting wine? How on earth? Very many of us would be very, very dismissive. That's my point today. But these individuals desired to honor that which they were doing. And they knew in that honoring, in following instructions, they would perform an act of kindness. Not necessarily producing wine, but there would be an act of kindness that they would bring into the equation. And they take it to the chief servant as they're giving the instructions. You know, Jesus would have taken this moment to show off. To show off. I am the one giving all these instructions, and I'm leading them to you so that eventually you may be happy. But Jesus is not interested with the outcome. Jesus is interested in fixing a problem. I wish we all spent more time in learning how to fix problems and to solve problems rather than just accomplishing an outcome. I wish we, and this is my call to us tonight, that we don't focus too much in gaining wealth than in helping people through life. And as you're doing that, you gain your wealth. But if you get fixated, corruption comes in because all you need is money. All you need is wealth. But when you spend time, and I want to give an example, somebody like the Facebook CEO, he saw a problem. He saw a need. People want to connect. And every other company that is giving this connection, they are charging them. They are asking money so that they can give them the connection that they needed. And he decided, you know, I have a gift. I have gifting here, right here. I am going to use this gift to help people get connected without asking for any money. But today he's a billionaire in that he gave people something. He spent time creating a forum, time, energy, and all those to give to people a tool that people can use to connect. And his wealth did not come at the beginning, but it came as a byproduct. And that is my point. That when we as Christians have been called by God, should we be listening to the outcome, to the numbers, people who come to our space? Should we be listening to, oh, money is going to flow in? Should we be, oh, I'll be a big gun, everybody is going to respect me? Or should we be helping people solve a problem, people who are in a crisis, and if the Lord wishes, he will bless us? And I believe it with all my heart that when you give yourself to a problem, you pay attention to details, at the end of the day, the blessing will follow you without you necessarily demanding for those blessings. And without you being the center stage. You're not this, you know the big picture here. The big picture is Jesus. And as we think about this narrative, and as we think about how are you showing up, are you paying attention to details? Are you allowing yourself to be led by others? Are you trying to fix a problem that you see, a need that you see? As you are doing all this, we must not lose sight to the larger picture. And the picture here is Jesus as the Messiah. And we shall be looking at this as we move along the journey, because there is a theological depth. There is a theological teaching there is greater wisdom beyond just a miracle. So, my final point, that when that miracle is performed, that is not the end point. And many of us, many preachers, we just pick up the miracle, call Jesus a miracle worker, and therefore, boom, they go out with that mindset that they also ought to become miracle workers. But that is not the point of the narrative. The point of the story is that Jesus is the Messiah, the incarnate human being, the incarnate God who's become human being so that he can redeem humankind. So what is the point of such a miracle? Definitely, when you look at all the resources that are being used here, the containers, when you look at wine, when you look at water, when you look at the wording, the command itself, hey, draw, it's imperative, draw, carry. All these are showing some form of authority that is beyond a miracle. As a church, we should not lose sight. Our game is not to show people that we can perform miracles. Our game is not to show people that we are gods. Our calling is not to show people that we are powerful and we can do great things. Our calling is to lead people to this Messiah. And we shall be walking through in chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, and beginning to see how this Messiah is revealed to us. So, how are you showing up? Are you using the resources available to you? And also, are you listening to the wisdom that is being given to you on a daily basis? Or are you dismissive of that wisdom? Is it the outcome that is leading you, or it is you following the call that you have received to meet a need of the people with the hope that the Lord is going to bless you? And what is the larger picture of what you're doing? What is the end product of what you're doing? The end product would be and should be changing lives. We are not just here for ourselves, we are here for something greater. I shared on my page today about the death of one of the greatest rabbis in the modern times. And I've encountered this rabbi through readings, through teaching, and also because I also use him for classes that I teach. And one thing that he has taught, Jonathan Sack, is that we are all connected. We are here for a greater calling, not just for the self. The we have a greater calling. We have a greater responsibility upon each other. The servants that were spoken to by Mariam picked up on that, and they acted because they knew they were not on this game for their benefit, but it was for the benefit and for the welfare of many. May the Lord bless you. And if this message touches you, kindly share. And I hope to see you next week, God willing. For now, once again, a few drum beats from Africa.